Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today's video is going to be a bit of a fun one. We're going to be talking about some minimalism mistakes that I've made over the course of the past 3 or so years that I have been living a more minimalist lifestyle. And there are definitely some things that I wish I could kind of go back and redo. And so hopefully today, whether you're wanting to get into minimalism or are just starting your minimalism journey, or perhaps are several years into it yourself, you can enjoy this video, hopefully learn from my mistakes, and I think this is really going to be a fun one. So before we get into this, be sure to grab yourself a cup of tea or hot beverage of your choice. And I am super excited to share that this video is actually a collaboration with one of my favorite YouTubers out there, Sarah Therese. And Sarah has an incredible channel where she shares about balancing mom and wife tasks, as well as minimalism ideals and how they benefit her family daily. I love how she approaches everything with a very intentional mindset and curates really healthy habits and routines that she not only loves doing herself, but also shares with her followers. She's also a fellow Canadian, and I actually had the chance to meet up with her in person last month, and she's just the sweetest thing. So today we're both going to be sharing some of the minimalism mistakes we've made, so that hopefully you can take away a nugget or two that you can maybe apply to your personal life so that you can avoid some of the mistakes that we've made. So if you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button below. Now let's get started with the first mistake that I've made, and that is not changing my buying habits. And I think this is something that a lot of us who come from a more consumerist type of background tend to experience. We're kind of programmed by society to buy. And so when we try to take a step back and declutter and minimize our lives, we experience this kind of friction because we kind of know that we shouldn't be buying, but at the same time, impulsively tend to buy because it's what we've always done. And that was definitely a mistake that I made when I first started minimalism, and quite honestly, it took me years to get to a place where I was no longer buying things impulsively and was instead able to be, for the most part, completely intentional about my purchasing decisions. And honestly, I think this is one of the most difficult but important mental shifts that we need to make when embarking on a minimalism journey. If we don't buy things intentionally, what we do is we just allow the clutter to build back up by mindlessly buying things, which then necessitates us needing to declutter again, and it ends up being this vicious cycle. So not changing my buying habits was a huge minimalism mistake that I made, and if you're wanting to adopt a more minimalist lifestyle, making that transition in your buying mindset from mindless consumption to intentional buying really is key. Moving on though, the next minimalism mistake I made was decluttering haphazardly. And when I first started decluttering, I didn't really have a plan for exactly how I was going to declutter my home. I knew that my clutter felt overwhelming, and so I would kind of declutter an item here and an item there, but I didn't really have a system or a plan to stick to so that I could be effective and efficient in my decluttering. And it's so funny looking back because once I finally started developing a plan and a strategy for decluttering, I was able to get so much more accomplished in a lot less time as well. And honestly, there are a ton of different decluttering methods available out there, and different ones are going to work better for different people. But what I'll say is this: having a plan is better than not having a plan. And I realize as I say this that absolutely sounds like common sense, like duh, have a plan. But I think that often when we're beginning decluttering, we can kind of feel overwhelmed. And so just research some different decluttering options out there, find one you think will work for you, and then just run with it. Okay, mistake number 3 that I made was organizing rather than decluttering. And I think that many of us are drawn to the concept of minimalism or the minimalist lifestyle because we love the way that a clean, fresh, relaxing space looks. And so we have a tendency to, when we start wanting to adopt a more minimalist lifestyle, just want to create a space that looks clean and nice as fast as possible. So rather than doing the hard work and actually getting rid of the excess that we have in our lives, what we'll actually do is just move things around, organizing them a bit, and trying to make things look a bit more pretty. This is definitely something that I did when first starting out, but unfortunately, organizing is just a short-term solution, and it's not actually going to create that beautiful, clean space you want long-term. The moment that life happens, your space is inevitably going to get messy again, and you'll be starting again from ground zero. So in order to create a more calm and stress-free environment in your home, we need to do the deep work. We need to kind of dig in and really focus on decluttering and letting things go, rather than just trying to organize them in a way that's aesthetically appealing. And of course, confronting and letting go of years worth of accumulated possessions is never going to be easy. But in order for us to really make progress in our minimalism journey, it's a step that we really need to take. This fourth mistake was such a big one for me, and it's thinking that minimalism is just about your possessions. And don't get me wrong, decluttering your possessions and simplifying in that area is definitely a huge part of minimalism, but it doesn't need to stop there. And in fact, I think that some of the biggest benefits of minimalism come when we apply that mindset to other areas of our life. I know that for me, I first got into minimalism as a result of feeling overwhelmed by the clutter in my life, but realistically, that was just a symptom of a bigger issue. Yes, the clutter in my life was causing me stress and anxiety, and decluttering that did help a lot. However, as I began decluttering my physical possessions, I began noticing other aspects of my life where I had excess and kind of clutter building up, if you will. Whether that was the way I was managing my money or my schedule or even my relationships and trying to maybe spread myself too thin without going deep into a few meaningful relationships. And so it really was as I began applying that idea of simplicity more broadly to my life that I began experiencing some of the greatest aspects of the minimalism lifestyle. And so my, advice from this one is just that simplicity can benefit so many aspects of our lives. We all the time try to overcomplicate things when in reality life is simple. And so I'd ask you just to think about and reflect on, maybe if you want to even journal about, how might your life be better with less? Also, I don't know if you guys just saw me there, but there was like a gnat flying around our apartment and it just went right past my face, and oh man, that was driving me crazy. So yeah, if I got distracted by that, I don't know if you can even see it in the camera, but it was distracting me. Let's move on now though and talk about mistake number 5, and that's just flat out donating everything that I'm wanting to dispose of from my decluttering. And I've made a whole video on this topic, so I'm not going to dive into it in too much detail here. I'll link to it below if you want to watch. But one of the things that I love about minimalism is it's kind of a spark for many people in kind of leading them to begin approaching life more intentionally. And as I kind of went down that path of intentional living, I began realizing that donating isn't always the right answer, and sometimes there are a lot more responsible ways of decluttering of items, whether that's selling them, repurposing them, recycling them, and sometimes they even need to go into the trash rather than being donated because the item can't be used. So it's definitely not that I've stopped donating altogether, but now I like to use a decluttering hierarchy to figure out what is the best way of disposing of an item that I'm wanting to declutter. And I really think that engaging in that idea of responsible decluttering is something that we honestly can all benefit from. Next, the 6th minimalism mistake that I made was not setting deadlines. And when you're decluttering, people will often tell you to have a keep pile, a declutter pile, and a maybe pile, where you can just kind of set those items aside for a period of time, see if you miss them, and then if you do after a certain period of time, either bring them back into your life or declutter them. And while maybe piles can be helpful in helping you to avoid decluttering regrets, the issue that I ran into them is that without a deadline, they just end up being clutter in a different location, and it never actually leaves your house. So personally, my solution with this one is just not to use maybe piles. I either love something or I don't. It's either in or it's out. I don't really like having that in between, but if maybe you do and it works well for you to have a maybe pile, at least set a deadline so that you say after 30 days, if I haven't worn this item of clothing, it's going to be decluttered. That way, as you're decluttering, you have something to stay accountable to you, and it's just one extra little way that you can stay on track. And then number 7 is a minimalism mistake that probably most of us minimalism lovers have fallen prey to at one point or another, but that's going too far. And there are many extreme minimalists out there who have just the bare minimum of possessions, and they get rid of everything that is not completely essential to their life. And when I was beginning my minimalism journey, I kind of tried stripping things down, I think a bit further than I necessarily should have. I got rid of a few things that I used and loved for the sheer sake of owning less. And when I finally took a step back and realized that, I was like, oh wait, maybe I've gone a bit too far. The thing is, you can still be a minimalist and still own things that you enjoy and that you love. The criteria that I like to stick to now is, do I love it and do I use it? If the answer to those two questions is yes, I'm fine with something staying in my life, even if it means that I have a few more of that item than what might be considered the minimalist ideal. And to kind of express that idea, I've really fallen in love with the term practical minimalism, where I'm using it to help simplify and make my life more intentional, but I'm not putting minimalism as like the forefront of who I am and my identity. And I think that can help us maybe to differentiate between the two. It's a tool, we don't need to go too far with it, and we can use it as long as it's practical and helpful to help us to live more intentional and joyful lives. And finally, number 8 is a huge one, and that is trying to enforce minimalism on others. And if you didn't know this already, my husband Christopher is not a minimalist, but unfortunately, and I'm honestly kind of ashamed to admit this, when I first began getting excited about minimalism and decluttering my life, not only did I try to force minimalism on Christopher, but I also tried decluttering some of his items for him. And guys, please learn from my mistake on this one. You definitely don't want to force someone into decluttering. We need to remember that minimalism is going to have a different level of value from person to person, and so it might not be for the person you're wanting to kind of encourage towards minimalism. But on top of that, we need to respect each person's right to make their own choices about their own possessions. So what I'd instead encourage you to do, if there's someone you have in mind who you think might benefit from what you've been learning about with minimalism, is to talk to them about it and share your personal experience and the benefits you've experienced from decluttering or minimizing. And then also, as they maybe want to declutter something themselves, encourage them in that and help them through that process. And once I kind of learned from my mistake with Christopher, that's the route that I took, and it really has been effective. Christopher wouldn't consider himself a minimalist today, but at the same time, he probably has 70% less clothing than he used to. So hopefully that gives you guys some hope or encouragement that if you have a spouse or family members or roommates who you kind of want to maybe adopt a more minimal lifestyle or to declutter, you know, there definitely can be progress made in that, but please just don't try forcing minimalism on anyone. All right, well, those are some of the minimalism mistakes that I've made over the past few years, and I hope they gave you some perspective that my minimalism journey has definitely not been perfect, and it's been messy, and if you're wanting to embark on a minimalism journey or you're in one currently, yours is probably going to be messy too. It just kind of happens that way. Simplifying our lives, especially when we come from that consumerist background, isn't easy, but it's definitely worth it. So hopefully you're able to learn from some of these mistakes, and if you want to hear about several more mistakes, be sure to check out Sarah's video. I absolutely love Sarah's channel, and I know that she's going to have some fantastic mistakes that she's made to share with you as well. That came out weird, fantastic mistakes, but I know her video is going to be amazing, so be sure to check that out. I'll have that linked up for you in the description box below, but definitely go check out that video, and when you do, make sure to subscribe to her channel. She's got some amazing minimalism videos on there that I know you're going to love. But with that being said, I want to know now, what are some minimalism mistakes that you've personally made, and what did you learn from them? Be sure to comment those down below, and if you haven't already, remember to subscribe to my channel for more simple and intentional living videos coming at you twice a week. And finally, if you aren't already, be sure to be following me on Instagram. I'm at Ashlynne.Eaton on there, and you can follow me for more daily minimalism and intentional living inspiration and updates. That is everything for today's video though. Thank you all so much for watching. I love you all so much, and I will see you in the next one.